Welcome to the Pantheon Plus Rewind. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 72 of the Rewind. If you're new here, we're so glad you've decided to check out our podcast, which is dedicated to the upcoming MMORPG Pantheon Rise of the Fallen by Visionary Realms. In this episode, we'll catch up on the September 2021 newsletter. We'll see what Pantheon's Twitter community had to say about locked classes in MMOs. We'll talk a bit about harvesting in dangerous areas. And we'll start reading a new chapter of the official lore in the Lore You Know segment. So, as a certain wizard once said, all we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. So with that in mind, let us make the next hour of your time entertaining, informative, and a decision that you won't regret. So thanks for being here, and please enjoy this week's Rewind. All right, speaking of wizards, we have a special guest with us this week. We're joined by our Pantheon Plus colleague, Mr. Twitch streamer and a man of many fireballs, Drac. How are you doing, Drac?
I am doing fantastic. We got New World coming out next week. I've been streaming some Pathfinder, Wrath of the Righteous, and life is good as an RPG gamer. Like, we got lots of stuff going on as we continue to be Pantheon patient.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an exciting time. Yeah, lots of cool, new games coming out. Pathfinder's doing well, and yeah, New World next week's a big deal. I know, Des, you're looking forward to that too, eh?
Yeah. I'm like kind of putting it off until the weekend. So after we're done with this podcast, I'm going like full tilt.
Yeah, going hardcore. Yeah. So yeah, lots of exciting stuff. And so Drac, we wanted to have you on the show. We've got some exciting announcements with Pantheon Plus in terms of content, some community events, and a bunch of more stuff. So why don't you spend a little time, bring us up to speed on what's going on with Pantheon Plus?
Yes, I actually have a couple of updates. First, we are excited to announce that our head webmaster person, Pyre, has finished with construction of the Pantheon forums. We're excited to unveil them, and they are part of our bigger plan for the Pantheon Plus website, which will be a future update. So, spoiler.
Yeah,
nice.
Little steps.
Little steps. The forums were also specifically inspired for the Pantheon crafting community and Nefel, because when we incorporated them, they wanted forums. So everyone needs to get over to Pantheon Plus and create a login and say something on the forums.
Yeah. No, they're very exciting, and it's fun to see them come along. Seeing them develop as time goes on. The process and watching them evolve into what they are now. I think everybody's going to be super excited to see how we've designed them and the look and everything like that. So, and a lot of hard work has gone into it. And like you said, Drac, Pyre behind the scenes does so much that we don't even share. We don't even talk about it. So.
Yeah, it can't be understated like how crazy it is. He built these. This isn't something he grabbed like as an add-on. These are ours.
Custom. Yeah.
The great and mysterious Pyre.
Yes, the shadowy figure above.
Oh, right. I almost forgot. Like, he doesn't actually exist. I always have to add that.
That's right. What else is going on?
But the forums do, so check that out, guys.
Yes, get to the forums. And that's pantheon.plus. Secondly, we are going to release our weekly Pantheon Plus calendar. We know that, we're all kind of waiting in the wings to do Pantheon, but Pantheon Plus has all kinds of stuff that's happening every week as we try to kind of fill our time and fill content before Pantheon Plus comes out. So what we want to do is we are going to create a calendar that has our Pantheon Plus videos, our articles, our streaming schedule, both for Pantheon Plus and also other streamers that are going to stream Pantheon when it comes out. Yeah. We can't take total credit for this idea. There might be a certain VR dev that fears bears that may have thought of this idea first, and we may have copied it.
It turns out schedules are pretty good, right?
Yes. But imitation is the greatest form of flattery.
That's
so,
exactly right.
So thank you, Minus. Hopefully you're seeing a picture of the schedule for this week now, and so you can kind of take a look and see what you want to check out this week.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think that it's exciting to sort of get our content organized a little bit, when we sort of hash this out and figured out how this is going to work. It's exciting to have something to look forward to all the time, right? You always sort of know when something's coming. I like to have that horizon in front of me. So for our content, and we've grown, in terms of what we do, in terms of the podcast, the Twitch streams, the articles, the fan fiction, everything. It's all sort of coming together. And when you get so much of this going on, we really needed to organize it. So we're excited to bring it to you, the community and the audience, and have this put out there so that you can see what's going on with us and what we're trying to do to keep us all, like you said, Drac, Pantheon patient. So yeah, right on, man.
I love that, like, we're bringing, other people into this too, highlighting other, like, streamers and content creators, because it's collectively going to show just how much is actually happening, even on a daily basis in the Pantheon community, because there's a lot of activity, and I want people to know that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So right on, man. Thanks for the update. And so Drac, you're going to stick around for the whole episode and join in our crazy discussions that we have. So that's awesome.
I am here for the whole thing.
You can't get the wizard to leave, even when you want them to. Next up, we're going to thank our adventuring party, as we always do. We have a big party this week. We have 8 folks who donated during the premiere on YouTube last week. So let's give a shout out to them. First up is Shuriken on the Dwarf Cleric. And we have Brian Reck, as always, on the Gnome Summoner. And Sparrow on the Elf Ranger. By the way, I didn't forget to put the graphic in this week. I'm saying it right now, so I don't forget to do it, because I did forget last week. So I'm sorry, Sparrow. I apologize on Twitter, but I'll do it again here. Anyway, also Bounty Code on the Human Wizard, Xanaphel on the Darkmer Druid, Redbeard Flynn on the Darkmer Summoner, Crowsinger on the Halfling Druid, and Ziplox on the Darkmer Rogue. So if you want to join the adventuring party for next week and you're here for the premiere, just hit that donate button. Let us know what your future Pantheon racing class is, and that's it. Easy as that. All donations go to support the show, and we always aim to give back to the community as much as possible. So on that note, we're actually giving away another Legat pledge this week. This is a $100 pledge to Pantheon's development, their crowdfunding. And it's courtesy of a friend of the show, Breakout, also a fellow streamer. Yeah, Breakout. Our Archive Shaman from the other night on DC Universe Online. Go check our video. We made a video about it. So he is also a streamer. So check out his channel. I'll put a link in the description for that. So to enter the giveaway for the show, just hit me up in chat, just at Theric with the YouTube play button emoji. That way I know you're interested, and I'll put your name down. And at the end of the show, as we always do, we'll draw a name and pick a winner, and then get you that pledge so you can join the community. But yeah, exciting. We got a big show lined up, so I don't want to hesitate anymore. Let's get to it. Good luck, everyone, on the draw, and on with the show. This week in Visionary Realms News and Notes. All right, so let's start with the September 2021 newsletter. Pantheon newsletter came out on September 16th. The newsletter was huge, and we're not going to have time to review all of it, but we are going to hit some highlights of it. And there's a few interesting notes here. So Des and Drac, let me know what you think of these as we go through them. We'll point out some of the more interesting parts. And first up was a note regarding the game world and development, just how they're building the world. Because the last dev stream, we saw Wild's End. So in this one, they said, in addition to their focus on developing Wild's End, this is, quote, world building efforts are ramping up this month, and we prepare to convert our Greybox terrain mesh into real terrain. This conversion will apply to the entirety of King's Reach continent and will happen simultaneously with the terrain streaming tech, bringing with it monumental performance boosts. So that's pretty exciting. I mean, and whenever you hear all of King's Reach, right, we know what that means.
Yeah, that's so huge.
So alpha, right? That we're talking alpha because that's the goal for alpha is a completed, a fully playable King's Reach continent, right? And when we hear the word alpha, what always happens then, right? You get lots of comments.
What we expect is for the comments to go crazy. That's what we expect there. Like, you do that every time. You're just baiting them into it.
Yeah.
Got to get that community interaction there as everyone throws in their take for alpha. The biggest thing, though, here is just like how monumental having the full terrain is going to be. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be a massive change.
Yeah, and that sort of leads to my question that comes from this announcement is that, what does the gray box terrain mesh versus the real terrain look like? So somebody who's not following the game as closely, we've seen both, right? But I'm going to ask you guys. So Des, I'll start with you. Like, think of what's an example of something that you can point to that they've shown the gray box terrain versus like the fully fleshed out terrain.
Well, I don't know about a side by side, but I do think back to the last terrain environment art stream where the object scattering was shown off, where he was building the roads and everything. And you could see that even in Graybox, when you started adding the object scattering, which helped fill everything out, it already made a big deal. So how I kind of imagine this is, we just saw that video of Mad Moore, right? And it was kind of the terrain and some trees and stuff, but without like we would call it ground clutter and, extra object scattering in that area. And so I kind of see the Mad Moor as our first little preview to having terrain.
Right.
I don't know what their exact pipeline is for that, but I feel like this is going to be like an in-between step where at least, we don't see the jaggy shapes, it's
right.
It's actually like a believable thing, and you can start to envision like what it's going to look like with ground clutter.
Yeah. What do you hear when you read that, Drac? What do you think?
Well, I think about Farenthale, right? And they had that one picture, right? That was like the vegetation and everything, and it was all purple and stuff. And then they had the remember the promo video that they took from that, and then you got like the thing, and it zoomed in and it went around and stuff. Like that's what I think. And that transformation from that content art or whatever we're called, or the preview art, to then that video where they were running around in. And they go see the treants, and like Joppa and Ben are climbing stuff, and like it looked amazing, right? And that was, what was that? That was like 6 months ago, 8 months
a little
ago?
more than that.
It was wow.
Yeah,
I lost track of time, but yeah, I mean, like that was amazing to me. Like, and for me, just like seeing not just like the preview art, and not just like, but seeing Joppa and Ben or the devs, or hint, any content creators run around in actual finished terrain, I think that'll be the next big like super wow moment for me. Like, that's gonna be awesome.
Yeah. So I mean, just if you watched the last dev stream and you saw the Wild's End, now take that, combine it with what we saw of Fairthale, and imagine that, what that's going to look like when that's applied to it. So that's how I'm conceptualizing it anyway. That's how I see it in my head. So very exciting. And the next part they talked about, world building is not just about the art. They said content is king, as they have said in the past. And they said our design team has been working through our zones, adding more content, itemization, and encounters. So of interest these past couple weeks has been a thorough level 1 to 20 itemization pass, a strengthening of the armor class stat, and the development of a new task and storyline content in Thronefast, Aventur's Pass, and Black Rose Keep areas. So yeah, more loot. They're loading up those mobs with loot. I
feel like the last like several updates have been them talking about itemizing the zones, right? Like this is like the fourth time, I think.
I mean,
Sacred, man, he's going crazy.
For Sacred, yeah, exactly. Let's be honest, when they say content is king, we think of game content like the world. No. The content of their pockets is what they're talking about with the mobs. That's what we're really interested in. I know, Drac, you agree with that. I know, 100% right.
I love loot. Like, looting is my absolute favorite thing to do in MMORPGs. Like, it's so much fun. And I want lots of different varied loot with lots of different varied stats, and only loot that drops off certain things, and only loot that drops in certain places. Like, that is the funnest thing for me to do, so I'm super excited about this.
Yeah, and like we're kind of joking around about it, but it's I believe it very strongly that it's really about loot hunting for a lot of time. When you're grinding mobs, or when you're just if you're a game that's challenging and with slower leveling, getting loot is what you're there for.
It's a massive part of the game loop, and I am remiss a bit to mention this, but I think it's just entirely applicable because this is just around the corner. another big crowdfunding project, or the big crowdfunded MMO project, Star Citizen. It is, they're about to come up on their 9th anniversary, I believe. And they are just, this next patch, implementing a looting system.
Wow.
Yeah. And but it's monumental, just in the same as it's monumental, even probably like testing, right? You could test mobs all day, but there's something about getting a little bit more of the game loop that actually gives context for the gameplay. So the testers are probably going to really appreciate this too.
I can't imagine playing a game with no loop implemented yet. Like, I would just be so like disappointed every time I killed something and be like, oh, it's got nothing. But, what are you going to do? They also mentioned, go ahead, Drac, yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, every time I feel bad about Pantheon and how long it's taken, I just think about Star Citizen.
Yeah,
sort of
very different, but very like some similarities too. Since I'm a fan of both, I like bringing that context in. So I'm not just gonna entirely like hate on the project. So if there are any other Pantheon backers that also set foot in Star Citizen, we can share stories here.
Yeah, just remember.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate on it. It's just, it's a long time.
It's been a long time.
It's been a long road.
Yes.
But a testament to how long development lasts, and these new newsletters are always pointing that it's a slow trot forward for crowdfunded games.
Yeah, absolutely. They also mention here they say tasks and storylines, and they've touched on this in the past a little bit about differentiating between tasks and storylines, and I just think it's important that we sort of remind or review for ourselves at least that storylines are the overarching like sort of perception things, the big grand stories you're going to be following through perception, whereas tasks are more what we think of as we've talked about this, Des, on the last episode or the one before, I can't remember. Just, more of the collection type quests and more of the, simple, go over here, do this, come back to me sort of thing, right? So.
Yep. Yeah, this actually made me think of Crow Singer's, I think it was posted on Twitter. She did a little thread a while back, about, what is a quest? Like most of the stuff that we do in MMOs isn't even a quest. So I actually love that they're doing this little, like, term separation here. It makes me so happy that this is still a thing.
Yeah, I do. I agree with you. I think it's important to separate those two. The next piece they talked about is that adventurers are, this is sort of just a sort of a tease, but adventurers have also reported the sounds of mining picks striking ore veins. That's right. Crafters will rejoice to hear the gathering nodes are now in the game. More details listed in the updates below. So yeah, gathering nodes are in the game, and we're going to talk about that in your section a little later, Des. So we won't spoil too much of it now, but good news for all you future Pantheon crafters and gatherers out there. Now with the roadmap to alpha, this is the big document that has sort of been allowing us to see their work and show what they're up to. So a couple updates on that. We touched on this a little last week, Des. We didn't want to talk too much about it because we didn't get a really fulsome explanation, but now we do. And that was with regarding to the train streaming and the HDRP being finished, as they said briefly at the end of the dev stream. And just the quick notes on this are the terrain and asset streaming tech is finished. The project, the HDRP project conversion, is complete and functional. They say work is beginning on bringing our current art assets into the HDRP project, making sure there are no shader conflicts or visual issues with each asset and fixing any that we find. Work's also beginning on converting Greybox into real terrain. We talked about that already. They said on the networking side, we're focused on hooking up the current networking to the new HDRP project so we can start publishing client test builds. And then integrating the network stack is slated to begin in October. So I think it's a really good filling out the explanation a little bit so that we understand exactly what's going on. One of the things that stands out to me is the art asset question. I think it's important to remember that, they still have a lot of art assets to create, right? There's still a bit of a process to going on there. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Actually, first off, I did want to just kind of shout out like how good of a like turnaround in communication this is that they're clarifying this, because this was asked by the community after they first kind of teased, they're finishing up with HDRP. And here they are clarifying it. It's just like how they defined the whole like in progress and to do and all that. Like, home run, guys. As far as the art assets, though, so I actually know this process. I did this in a few projects of my own in Unity, just to see like what it's like. And you know what can actually throw a big wrench in that is asset store items. And we know they have used a good amount of asset store items. And the problem with asset store items is, each creator has different standards, and you have to make sure that all works well when you pull them over to HTRP. So I can see all the kind of QA that goes into this. And so, but it is kind of a finishing step. So it's still something to rejoice over, I think. But there's still stuff to do. Yeah.
Nice. That's great insight, man. Thanks. They talked about the perception system, a bit of an update on that. They said the new spawning system, gathering crafting, is being incorporated into the world. Item spawning used by the perception system. This will allow us to set up our interactable objects with spawn variability as we intend. They implemented Tome of Keeping UI, persistent tracking of stirrings, which is something that Jop has mentioned on a couple streams. It's just the word stirrings is sort of like I don't know what it is. I don't think they've really defined exactly what it is, unless I miss something.
Isn't it basically like perception pings, like the little things that pop up? Isn't that kind of what it was supposed to be? Or am I off the wall here? Because I thought Joppa clarified that in a stream, but I'd really have to dig to find that one.
Drac, do you know? Because we don't know, obviously.
I have no idea. I don't remember ever hearing about stirrings, though. So
I think it's just them like putting an actual like name to a feature,
to the ping, so it's not just called a perception ping. Okay,
yeah, I think so. If any devs want to clarify that, it'd be really, really nice.
Yeah, exactly. So they're working on that. They're implementing perception experience gain with perception titles. I want to talk about that for a second. Drac, what's up with that? I thought, are we going to be getting experience from perception pings? Is that not what that sounds like to you?
I didn't think so. I thought they clarified that, and this could have been a while ago, but I thought they clarified. I thought we were going to have a perception level and then like a regular experience level. And so your perception, like you do perception stuff, and then that raises your perception level. And so you would get different titles and stuff and different perception, maybe abilities or stuff from doing perception, but it wouldn't affect experience or gameplay, because that's their big thing, right? They said that perception wouldn't be mandatory. You wouldn't have to do it, and there would be no advantage towards it. So I think if it provided actual leveling experience, I think that would go against that.
Yeah, it's been my understanding as well. So it's a little unclear. I mean, we could definitely use some clarification on that point. But if that is the case, it would make sense from like the way you describe it, Drac, makes sense from a how you become a keeper, right? How do you work towards that? But again, we're just sort of, these are just questions we have. We're not sure. We're not devs. We don't know. We're just sort of brainstorming, I guess. The next piece on the updated roadmap was regarding improving starting experience for new players. They said several new tasks have been added for early level players in Thronefast to discover. 2 small overland dungeons are being developed in Thronefast to allow players to experience the grouping magic of Pantheon earlier in their journey.
Man. Sorry, I can't contain myself on this one. Like, that line might be my favorite part of the update. Like, I mean, obviously... yeah. Anyway, I'm really a big fan of low-level dungeons. I'll just say that, and like pushing that to earlier, especially with like limited testing sessions, right? Want to make sure that more people can test that like kind of fundamental grouping stuff, and I'm so excited about this.
I know you are too, Drac. What were you gonna say?
Yes. So, like, some of my most favorite and memorable dungeons were low-level dungeons in EverQuest, right? Things like Black Burrow and Crushbone, like, those are so memorable. Just, like, getting to the bottom of Black Burrow was one of my favorite things ever, and just, like, roaming around there and dying and having to get my body back and having friends help me get my body back and just, like, exploring that whole area. That was so cool to have a low-level dungeon and as a part of the world, and you don't have to wait till you hit max level before you do dungeons.
Yes.
I think it's just such a fantastic idea.
Yeah,
Yes.
I can't agree with you guys more. Like, it's so good. A long time ago, we had a discussion somewhere about, what should the onboarding process for Pantheon be like? And I was like, you got to get people grouped up ASAP.
Mm-hmm.
You can't let them go solo for too long and then introduce grouping as like this is a new thing you can do now. And it's like, no, I really feel like you should be grouping as soon as is reasonably possible. And I'm glad to hear that they're sort of working on these low-level experiences, these low-level group experiences. I think if you took a bell curve of like everybody's memories of their favorite MMO, back in older days, I guess, when grouping was more common, but you're going to have this major bell curve where in the middle it's going to be these low-level dungeons. Everybody did Black Burrow, Crushbone, and maybe they didn't continue with the game into the high-level stuff, but everybody has those early dungeon experiences, right? Because they were easier to get to, they were more accessible early on, and probably some of the best memories, like you said, Drax. So
yeah,
really
I just like that
update.
they were trying to like set a precedent early. Like that's how I see it. Whether or not these are going to be finalized or anything like that, we're still very far from release. But this is in their mind to improve like starting experience for one reason or another. When that trickles into the main game, it just means that people that jump into Pantheon understand what it's all about even sooner, rather than that kind of getting thrown at them, in the late teens or something like that after they've been playing for hours and hours.
Yeah, that's something I've said for a long time, is like, you can't expect people to know how to play with others when they haven't been expected to play with others the whole game. You can't do that, right? It doesn't work.
And how many MMOs have we had in the past where like they waited in development, they waited till the last minute before they started adding group content, right?
Mm-hmm.
They waited till the last minute before they started adding dungeons, and they waited till the last minute before they started adding raids. And then the launch hit and all that stuff was garbage because they didn't test it good enough. And so Pantheon's not making that mistake. They're getting all this dungeon content, and they've shown us a couple even raid zones that they're already working on, and they have plans for raid zones already. And so I think that's just a way smarter plan.
Yeah, I agree. And then the last note on the update for the roadmap was regarding Black Rose Keep. They said regarding zones, it said Black Rose Keep is undergoing optimizations and a full content review, including the addition of perception content and an overhaul of the NPC and encounter designs to utilize combat awareness. And Wild's End is now playable and in-game in its gray box form. It's currently in full development with a focus on creating the finished 3D art needed for each section of the zone. And yeah, like we talked earlier, they're focusing on the 3D art aspect for Wild's End. So interesting to see Black Rose Keep getting some attention too. A fan favorite, I think, from back in the day when they did a stream in there, and some content, all the streams, content creators, got to play, and they were always good. They were always entertaining. Black Rose Keep was kind of like the Halner's Cave of
it's the counterpart of Halner's Cave. It's kind of a meme. But I actually love that they're revisiting Black Rose Keep rather than like coming into a new dungeon, because if you guys remember that kind of teaser, the gray box teaser from last year, I believe, when they're redoing it, I really enjoy that it's going to let us see that iterative process of VR having people play in original Black Rose Keep, then like coming at it with bigger, better, more stuff, and we're going to see that progress, and you just. It's better than, I think, spoiling another location, because we are a little familiar with it, but we still get to see progress. I think it's really smart.
All right, guys. Any final thoughts on the newsletter from last week? Or 2 weeks ago now, I guess?
I feel like we could probably pick pieces out of that newsletter for the next 3 weeks and still have content. It's great. These newsletters are absolute home runs. No joke.
Yeah. All right. So that's the VR news. Now let's do some notes, because Pantheon, their Twitter account, put out a pretty interesting discussion that was all about locked classes in MMOs. They said, what are your thoughts on classes being locked behind achievements/content? So this is a pretty spicy topic. And we have some recent experience with this, Drac, playing Final Fantasy XI. Do you want to start us off with some feedback there?
Unlocking classes, I think, is a horrible, horrible idea. I hate the idea of not being able to access the class I want from the start, right? It makes me feel like I'm like the kid who didn't get the red rifle for Christmas and everybody else got it, right?
Oh, man.
And so, like, Derek gets to play as Ranger, and, you know, Nathan gets to play as Paladin, but I have to play a Mage for 30 levels. And then I finally, after I level up for 30 levels, playing a class I don't like, then I get to make my Wizard. Like, that's a horrible experience.
Mm-hmm.
I do like to offer solutions, though. So my solution is then, rather than unlocking classes, I like unlocking race class combos that aren't available.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a much better idea, because then it feels like I'm winning, right? It feels like I get something.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. And so, I mean, there was a lot of ideas from the Twitter community here in terms of stuff like that. And I tried to include some of the more creative thoughts. So we'll go through them and you guys can tell me what you think of some of these ideas. But the first one is from Level Up Larry. And they said, all for this. Kind of related, but an alternative class unlock system could revolve around the cosmetic side too. So imagine having exclusive class-specific quests that unlock more complex particle effects or combat animations there. So channeling my inner classic EQ here, he says. So that is kind of a cool idea, right? Like, what if it wasn't like classes were locked? What if it was like just improvements to your class that unlocked as you went along? Like something that didn't change how they played, or the fundamental nature of the class just gave them some more sparkles or something.
This is actually, and so the first time I read this, I was like, oh yeah, that's cool. And then I thought about it a little bit though. And one thing that's incredibly important for I'd say any game that has like different classes or characters or something like this, from like a MOBA to an MMO, having a like particle effects, their abilities be really, noticeable, or not noticeable, the like standardized, I guess. So like, if a shaman casts this ability, it's like, oh, that's their AC buff or something like that, right? Like that's actually really important, even in the competitive side, to know like, oh yeah, I'm seeing my wizards throw their fire bombs, like I know what that looks like. And then to have later down the line that spell look different,
that's a good point.
It's a little weird. So it would have to be like, I think, really special cases, and not change it so much that it's unnoticeable anymore. It's like a different completely thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. The next one is from Redbeard Flynn, a member of the adventuring party this week. He said, I think it can work if done well, but it's difficult to balance prestige and balance. Final Fantasy XIV might be a good model for locked classes. The downside is, of course, forcing people to play something they may not want to just to unlock the class they actually want to be.
Like Dragon.
Yeah, that's a problem.
That's a problem. That's a problem.
That's why it's a horrible system. Horrible.
What is Final Fantasy XIV? For a ranger, you guys probably know more than I do, but you can't be a ranger to start, right? You got to start as something else, like a bard or something crazy. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like rigged as part of the progression, like, of the game. It's almost like levels. That's how I see it. I still am not a huge fan, if I'm honest, but that's kind of how I see it. That's a mechanic of the game that I just like kind of accept, I guess.
Yeah. Next one was from Sly Guy Triple Z, and they said, I'm not against grinding to unlock some class that's cooler or better. I wouldn't mind some interesting requirement, like using caster summoner that unlocks a different race's caster that normally wouldn't have it, or the looks and skills would be different maybe. They went on to say, with that said, I normally focus on one class once I like what I like, but imagining only playing a monk to unlock the Ascended Monk class, that's not really a monk because it plays different. Could be interesting in the long run. Anyway, I like what they're saying about, adding in new races that couldn't be that class before. I think that's a cool idea.
Yeah.
Like, what if as you leveled up, you unlocked a race, that your class could potentially play. So, I mean, I don't know how that would work mechanically. You'd have to start over, whatever, but that's an interesting idea.
Like we just had a discussion about like the betrayal quests in EQ2, how that would technically unlock, your class being able to play as a race that they wouldn't normally be able to play as, and how much I freaking love that. I'm definitely all for something like that. And, we do still have huge question marks on the progeny system, so maybe it would mesh with that.
Oh, Des, you stole it. I was about to say that.
Hey, if it's not in the notes, it's free. It's free reign, Drac.
It's free. I just
roll with it. Roll with it.
Yeah, no, totally. Because I know it's super dangerous to bring up Progeny, and they've kind of even backed off Progeny. VR's kind of backed off Progeny a little bit, but I think that's an excellent way to add in Progeny is to you max level your race class, and then you unlock another race for your class. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. And it could totally happen like post-launch. I love that. It's totally something that can come later, and it'll just be a really cool feature when it happens, but it's not going to be like, oh, well, you have to do this. It's totally like your own preference, and I love that.
Yeah, I agree. The next one was Antimony, and they said, no. Something as simple as the class or race one plays needs to be available to everyone from the start. I don't have to spend tons of time and effort playing a race class I don't actually want to play just to unlock the one that I do. So again, echoing what you said, Drac, I'm kind of following in that line of thinking as well. It's not something that I'm a big fan of, but we'll carry on and see what other people think as well. The next one's from Angel Terry. They said, depends on how long it takes to get and how hard it is to get. Remember how one became a Jedi in Star Wars Galaxies way back in the day. That's a good point. I've heard people bring that up. Yep. I didn't play Star Wars Galaxies. Did either of you guys play Star Wars Galaxies?
I came in late to the emulator, but because I bought the game and I didn't have time to play back when it was at its high point. And I had several friends that were like, that was their game though. And the mechanics of it were incredibly good for that game. And I immediately thought of Jedi when I saw this as well. And so I'm really glad this person posted, because I think it's really relevant, but at the same time, would that work with Pantheon?
Well, what if what if being a keeper was a class? If you looked at being a keeper as a class, apparently in Star Wars Galaxies, Jedis were extremely hard to become a Jedi.
Oh yeah.
It was also extremely random. Each character had their own way to unlock it, and you had to get certain classes and certain combinations up to certain levels, and then it unlocked it for you. And so you didn't know what it was for your character. And so it was just super random, and so that's what made it the most difficult.
Right. Well, that's interesting. And some people find that super frustrating. I think some people would find that satisfying when they hit that that sort of secret matrix, what they needed for their character, but hard to say.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like the only way that it kind of can work. And the other side that I just want to note on that specific example is like a Jedi didn't mean you were invincible either. Like you have specific counters to you that you have to watch out for. So it wouldn't be like in Pantheon, let's say there's some, super OP class that you can only get to by like Progeny or something like that. It's different than that, because unless Pantheon also included the counter to that. There's got to be these checks and balances and some randomness to make it actually feel special, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with you. The next one is a point that we sort of already made, but takes a little twist on it. It's from Gory Glory 0714. They said, if it's available for the race I'm currently playing, would you be able to switch over to that class, or would I have to start a new character? So just sort of like looking at it from like, the race that they start out at, can they take that class and move it to, move it to a class that race couldn't necessarily be. So we already mentioned that a little bit, won't go on, but sort of a little twist on that. The next one's from Senna, and she said, I think Final Fantasy XI did it best. Have any job at level 30, and you can do any of the quests to unlock any of the advanced jobs. It's not that far into the game, but it's far enough that it's a good payoff, and you really feel accomplished starting the new class. And so, like I said, Drac, we've just experienced this. I got to tell you, getting to level 30 in Final Fantasy XI, even with it being much faster now, seemed like a lot. It seemed like a big ask.
Dude, it's a huge ask. We didn't even make it that far, man.
No,
it was
we didn't.
Ridiculous. And just like think about back in the day, how long it would have taken you to grind all the way to level 30.
I know. And I don't know if playing EverQuest, if I hadn't been able to start as a ranger, if I had to start as like, I don't want to say any class because I don't want to piss anybody off. I'm like, what if I had to start as a druid? But I know we have lots of, Desmond, I don't want to insult your druid class. I just realized as I was saying it. But no, like I wouldn't want to start as another. I don't know if I would have gotten there, if they'd have been that difficult, given how slow the leveling was. And then if you speed up the leveling so that you can make the classes accessible, it's like, well, what's the point then? Then you're affecting a whole other part of the game for a
That'd
negative.
actually make it worse.
It would make it worse. Yeah. So I don't know, man. I like the idea of it. There's something about the idea that I like, and I think Final Fantasy XI was interesting from that perspective, but I don't know.
I love that, like, there are people, because we started this out and you guys are kind of like, oh, Final Fantasy XI, oh my gosh, and then someone comes along and they're like, I love this.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Did you actually get Final Fantasy XI installed? Because I don't know.
Seriously, that should unlock all the classes. If you can install the game now, you should unlock every class that has ever played from day one. That's like the reward. But craziness. The next one is from Co-Carnage, from friend of Pantheon, streamer, as everybody knows. He said, love it. Prestige classes or classes you can only be if you max a base class, complete their quest lines would be awesome. Not necessarily more powerful, but just different with more focused versions. It's also important not to lock content in something like prestige classes, just vary it. He said, for instance, you level a rogue to max, complete an epic quest line, become an assassin. The assassin would have less normal damage, but much higher backstab stealth damage. Overall DPS would be comparable, maybe a little higher than a base rogue, would have less tricks. So, yeah, interesting stuff. Like, again, not locking a whole class behind content, just an evolution of the class in terms of how it plays a little bit, giving it some extra abilities, giving it a bit of a different identity, maybe a little bit of a different role necessarily based on what those abilities are. I think that's interesting.
So I actually have a specific example here, and I can't remember if this was brought up in the thread or not. And I know my fellow EverQuest Online Adventures folks might actually chime into this if they haven't already. This is a kind of feature of EverQuest Online Adventures, which was my first big MMO. And, you basically have this prestige class, and I believe they had 2 options for each regular class, but it did make you distinctly unique within that class. And I remember some very specific ones. But as Co puts it, it doesn't necessarily make you like generally more powerful. It just makes you more specialized. And I actually totally for the whole specialization aspect of prestige classes.
Right. Yeah. Specialization is fun, and when you can craft your character, just personalize your character a little more or put it into a certain role a little more strongly. I think that's interesting. A few more here. First one's from Tug, and they said, I think the unique epic classes tied to a long quest line once you max your character can be amazing. A class that takes a tenet of the main class and amplifies it at the expense of its overall utility. So that's basically just adding on to what Co was saying, enhancing your character a little bit.
I feel like enhancing your character is cheating, though. That's not actually changing your class. That's just developing your class at the max level. I don't feel like that's really what we're talking about here.
If it's like if you're a wizard or something, and the prestige class or whatever that does more damage, I mean that's that's what everyone's gonna choose.
If I change
right?
from a wizard to an arch wizard, like that's not really a difference.
Yeah,
right?
it would have to be like a specialization, like you specialize in the cold skills, or you specialize in something like that. I know it doesn't perfectly work with the Pantheon wizard, but as an example, there has to be some like trade-offs, I think, for that to work. So it can't just, you're right, it can't just be like a boost in your main like thing.
Yeah. Next one's from Balorni. They said hidden class skills to unlock through hidden achievements from dedicated gameplay would be awesome. Imagine after killing 100,000 goblins, you unlock the hidden class Goblin Slayer, an aura that debuffs goblins and anti-goblin skills, rewards for dedicated role playing. Oh man, don't give people ideas.
Have you ever seriously done this in a game? Because I had a friend who killed 5,000 fairies in EverQuest 2 so he could get the title Slayer of Fairies.
Yep.
And
really?
I did too.
It took him 3 months to get that thing. 3 months. Because there were only like 4 or 5 mobs in the game that actually counted as a fairy.
I think Jin was the hardest one when I was really in full swing. And so seeing, the Destroyer, I think was the highest title. It was like, if you could get Jin, it was just like, dude, you have way too much time on your hands. But that
Dude,
actually
and
tied in.
100,000.
That actually tied in with like Master Strike, though. So there was actually a tangible reason to kind of pursue these, particular enemies, and I actually really liked that system. But I think the whole idea of like hidden achievements it's lost today. It's
But what if it like
hidden.
like what if it did something? Like what if they're saying here, it creates some sort of, it gives you some powers, or it creates an ability for you, and that's kind of cool, right? Like,
oh yeah.
If I'm a ranger that has specialized in killing wolves for whatever, and I'm extra good at killing wolves, I don't know. That's
I'm
cool.
I'm all for that system, actually. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of that Master Strike setup from EverQuest 2 as like a fairly simple example. So I actually hope they do this in Pantheon to some degree,
Yeah.
Right. I'm a fan of this too, but this, again, I don't think is making new classes, right? Mm-hmm. Because in the thing, it said you make a new class Goblin Slayer. Like, then you don't have to start over as a Goblin Slayer. What we're saying is you kill 10,000 goblins, and then you get an ability on your already character that's a wizard that slays goblins better.
Yeah.
Like, you're not starting over with a new class called Goblin Slayer. Like,
right.
No, that's for no way. Don't do that, because that's.
But awful. Then, what if you could then create a level 1 character, a new Goblin Slayer character? That was your class.
No, don't do that. That's painful.
Well,
funny.
So
that's pretty
what
funny.
if it takes the same amount of time to kill 100,000 goblins as it would to level up another character?
Do I get to vote neither? Both of those things are horrible. That's awful ideas. Don't do that. All classes should be available at the start. No.
This last one, Drac, this guy was thinking along your lines, and this is from Cobb Bobbles, and they said, in an MMO atmosphere, this ends up being just a tedious method of finally getting to play a class you wanted to try from the very start. So
I think that's brilliant.
Brilliant, yes. Simple and sweet way of saying no, not a fan of it. So this is a very, you can see this is a very divisive topic. Some people love it, some people really don't like it. And I think that I think we've said our piece throughout this, so we won't go into it unless you guys had anything else you wanted to add about this.
I would just say I actually fall kind of in between. Like, if this was a thing, I would just accept it. Like, it's part of the game. I wouldn't really be all too upset. But I see enough people that really don't like that system that I'm probably a little bit partial towards that, just based on other people. But for me personally, I wouldn't mind too much. But all part of my story.
Drac has spent this time throwing fireballs at the screen because he's upset about this topic. So I think we know where he stands on this.
I will grudgingly accept whatever VR does, but this would annoy me.
Right.
There you go. Nice. All right. So that's it for VR news and notes. Go check out the newsletter. Read it in full. We just hit the highlights. There's a lot more to it than that. We'll come back probably at another show and do another piece of that because there was a lot to it. But that's it for this week's VR news and notes. When the Pantheon community speaks, we listen. So let's dig into the forums and fan projects to see what the discussion's all about.
All right. For this week, I snagged a quick little forum thread titled Harvesting in Dangerous Places by StoneFish. Now, usually I'm looking for threads with a ton of discussion between community members or just kind of generally interesting ideas. But this one caught my eye, mostly because Nefel, which is, the VR dev in charge of crafting and harvesting design, actually answered a few of the questions directly. And being that the newsletter had some harvesting information, I thought this would be a little bit appropriate for us to touch on real quick. So, like I said, the thread kind of starts out with some questions. And so I'm going to kind of bounce between, question and when Nefel answers, because they're done in a bit batches and stuff. But I'll just go one at a time here. So the first one, and background being the StoneFish is planning on being like a ranger. So they're wanting to, forage basically and make consumables out of harvestables. And so like, they're really looking for that kind of like being on the lookout for components and stuff in the wilderness. So StoneFish poses if an item is harvested in areas of environmental stress, which requires like acclimation gear, etc., will they be different than items found elsewhere? And Nefel's response is, there will indeed be rare and exotic materials that are generally only found in large quantities in dangerous environments. Very straightforward, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I do notice he says in large quantities. And I don't want to like read into it like too much, right? But when he says in large quantities, it almost makes me kind of feel like, well, maybe that still means that leaves the door open to finding rare and exotic materials in regular areas, but it's just probably in it looks like smaller quantities or rare or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's interesting that this is kind of a bean that you dug up here, because this is kind of really helps us expand our understanding of what gathering is going to look like in Pantheon. And we know about the acclimation system, we know about atmospheres and that kind of stuff, or all the terminology that they're using now for it, but integrating this into the harvesting and crafting system is really important. I remember back before Nefel joined with VR, he was a frequent poster on the forums, and he used to come up with some of the best stories about what his vision was about how going into a cave where there was multiple environments and you had to get to a certain level of acclimation to harvest a certain material. Like, he just did a great job of always painting that mental picture for you so that you knew what he saw, and how it would feel to be in a really dangerous place trying to get that rare material that like nobody has and everybody wants, right? I mean, we've played enough MMOs to know that there's always that unobtainium, right? In every MMO you've ever played, where people are like, I want to craft this whatever ultimate breastplate and I need this material, and it's like so expensive, nobody has it. The only people who have it are the high level raiders, that kind of stuff. And I think that's exciting, so yeah.
I definitely like that, it's obvious that they're already thinking about the interplay between all these different systems. Like, like I said, acclimation, atmospheres, or like all of these things that make Pantheon kind of unique and have the environment be an enemy as well. In some cases, it's tying into like non-combat stuff, and I love that.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, we've seen movies, TV shows, whatever, where there's always that guy, like, it's a blizzard, for the ages, and he's harvesting, he's got that mining pick and he's trying to chip away at something while he's freezing on the side of a mountain, trying to get that rare piece of material or something like that. It's just such a cool idea, right? Mm-hmm. So, and like you said, the large quantities aspect of what Nefel said is very interesting too, because it tells you that there's going to be big crafting projects, or there's going to be things that require excessive amounts of material.
Yeah, and we'll get to that. I'm actually excited to talk about that. But the next question is, if I gather wood in areas around Wild's End and then areas in the toxic area, I think they mean Madmoor, will they be the same type of wood? Now, this was actually, to me, I was like, oh, well, like, they're not going to make a different type of wood for like each specific, area within a zone or something. And again, we kind of fall back to a little bit of what he said before, what Nefel said. So what Nefel says is, while you may see some things that are available everywhere in Wild's End, so kind of like the whole zone, he says, you may find that you can get more of them in more dangerous areas. Again, we're coming back to that. You can get more. It's like a quantity thing. And he also says you may also find that there are some things that are only available or easier to find in those dangerous areas. So again, not ruling out the idea of finding stuff outside, but definitely saying if you're looking for a quantity of something special, you're gonna have to risk it.
Yeah. And then go ahead, Drac. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I really hope that they spice up the gathering a little bit, because I'm not a crafter, but I am a gatherer in MMOs because I like money. And so I gather all my stuff and I sell it. So I hope there's just like lots and lots and lots of different stuff to gather in each of the, different starting zones in each of the 3 parts of the world. Like if it's just because we've seen so many MMOs where there's just a system of, okay, between levels 1 to 10, this is what you gather, and this is your common, and this is your rare, and that's how it is. And then 10 to 20 same, and 30 to 40 same, and 40 to 50 same. And you're just like, okay, so I have 2 things on each level, and then I have to get enough of that stuff in that level to level me up to the next thing, to get the next thing. Like, that's all garbage.
And then and the old stuff is useless now. Like the 1 to 10 stuff, the old stuff is done.
Oh my goodness, it's just garbage. Why? I want tons and tons and tons of different stuff to gather. I want 6 or 7 different types of woods. I want 10 different types of things I can mine, like all kinds of stuff. Why do we have to make it this easy? Like, it should be a huge spreadsheet on Nefel's computer of all this stuff. Like, these are the different components that you need to make with different things. Like, it should be like super complex, not just like, okay, 3 different things, we combine them and we make a hatchet. Like, no.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree.
We're about to start playing a game that I actually feel deserves some props for this, and that's New World. While they don't have a lot of different components throughout the world, they actually have a lot of different components, but the nodes themselves are, well, they look awesome. They're really unique. But also, you can start seeing some of the high-end stuff way before your character can get it. And they actually already have designed the areas so that it's good to go back. Like, you still need those components from quote-unquote low-level areas. And I hope that's a trend in the MMO industry, honestly.
Yeah. It's funny, the more I read about the gathering and harvesting in New World, the more I look forward to it, actually. I am a gatherer, I'm like you, Drac. I mean, in crafting, I do crafting, but harvesting and gathering is just fun because you're out there anyway and you're seeing it. And I know you and I, when we run around, you always steal my shinies off the floor before I can get to them.
I get them first. They're all mine.
And Drac is the harvesting, the what is the loot stealer of harvesting or whatever?
I'm the ninja looter of all things on the ground.
Yeah. The
word I was looking for. Yeah. So anyway, I agree with you guys. And what you were saying about the tiers of gathering materials is just become so standardized and uninteresting.
So linear and stale.
Linear, exactly.
So the last question of the original post is, again, kind of a just simple but clarifying question, which is, will my gathering and harvesting be a skill that can be improved? Some might consider that like an obvious, question. But we don't really know much about it yet, right? So it's worth asking. And Nefel answers. So he says, indeed, that's the plan. So there will be a skill level associated with gathering or harvesting. And notes again that they're going to share the exact details of how it's going to work at a later date, but there will be some progression in terms of your gathering skill and ability alongside things like tools and equipment that you may use. Harvesting gear, guys. Do you like harvesting gear?
I do. I mean, I like that it gives you an option to put some resources into your harvesting and gathering, like if it's, but they should be meaningful, obviously, because you don't want them just to be throwaway, like pick it up at the vendor. It's vendor sort of purchasable, and like they should be something that actually encourages people to, am I going to put some resources into this aspect of my game? I think they make a lot of sense.
I think it also helps with interaction, right? So for my mining stuff, I have to get stuff from the lumber people to make my improved mining pick, right? And I have to interact with the world around me. It's not just me going, like you said, not just going to a vendor and picking up the next pickaxe off the vendor. You have to interact with somebody to get the next thing. I really like that aspect of it.
Yeah, I especially prefer having equipment, even more than just a tool, even that's optional, that doesn't bar you from harvesting nodes, especially like common nodes, but maybe gives you some sort of bonus. So what it kind of means is if you're casually going around, you're not missing out on harvesting something, but there's probably a chance you might have like a better chance of getting a rare or slightly more if you were wearing your harvesting gear. So it just kind of gives options And again, I'm kind of looking forward to this in New World because they take this approach as well, where you can go and harvest stuff with whatever tools, but it's probably going to be slow. You're probably not going to get a lot of rares and, et cetera, et cetera. But you can still do it. And I think that's really important for a kind of tertiary skill like harvesting that a lot of people are going to do even if they don't participate in crafting.
Right. Yeah, good points.
So another user, Adon Hiram.
It's pretty good.
Okay.
That's what it looks like to me.
Okay. So they reply saying, I'm wondering if this will push players to form harvesting groups and expeditions. I had to pull this, guys. Like an obvious Vanguard plug, but like I love group harvesting.
Yeah, and I can't see how it doesn't. I mean, to me, if we're talking about dangerous areas, we're thinking acclimation, but danger comes in all kinds of forms. Danger from mobs, danger from think about Wild's End, what we saw with the well pond and how deep that well pond was. What if there's harvesting stuff at the bottom of the well pond?
Oh, there's gotta be.
I mean, beyond harvesting corpses of halflings, there's got to be something down there. So, I do think this does lend itself harvesting in dangerous areas to groups, expeditions, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I love this as well. I've never understood why harvesting it seems like in other MMOs it's only done by yourself. Like, why can't we incorporate that with group play, right? Why can't there be mining nodes that it takes 4 people to mine? That just sounds like a lot of fun to me.
Yeah, totally. And fortunately, one of the forum users, SinisterSaint here, kind of gets a little bit more out of Nefel on this, which is awesome. So they ask, will there be bonuses given to groups that gather together, or will gathering be a solo activity? So literally just what we're getting into right now. So a little bit of tentativeness I sense here, but Nefel says right now we're not planning for any specific bonuses in terms of the resources you get from harvesting as a group. However, it will likely be possible. And so like with that on the table, SinisterSaint also asks, what about massive nodes that can take a group together? Again, like kind of what we were talking about. Now, this is where the somewhat concrete, I say somewhat concrete because, everything can be in flux, and I'm not going to hold Nefel to this permanently, but Nefel says there will indeed be very large nodes in some places that might take a single person a long time to gather from.
Sitting there all day.
Right, but it's still possible. It's still possible. But it seems like, again, we're taking that approach of, like, it's basically confirmed now that, at least in a design idea, Nefel wants nodes to have varying sizes. Like, that seems to be a huge gist of what he's saying here, right?
It sounds like to me, it's like, you think of it from a group content standpoint, it's like, yo, I can solo that bear. And it's like, well, yeah, you can. It's going to take you an hour, so do I want to solo that node?
Yeah.
I need LFG for node, like that's what I see happening.
Or you're like scared of repops because it's taking you.
Yeah. Oh, the node repopped on me. Oh no.
But again, he kind of notes that there might be bonuses like for groups, maybe not in like the quantity. So like there's the same total amount of, like, let's say ore in a rock, but the ability to mine it quickly and efficiently seems, I think that's perfectly fine. Like that sounds great.
Yeah, I mean, it actually honestly seems like a pretty good way to add a group bonus in there if time is a factor, especially like you say with respawns and stuff. Like if you clear out an area but you don't have time to mine it before the room repops, that's going to be bad.
Yeah, I think it already sounds great, like well thought out right from the start. So can't wait to see more on this, honestly. But so SinisterSaint has one more question here that I had to preferably pick because I'm a little biased here. He asked, will the gathering classes actually have skills to utilize like they did back during Vanguard Beta? So I actually remember this system. Originally, Vanguard actually had your own abilities, like you would for killing a mob, although simplified for harvesting regular nodes. Now, before I like poke this too much, how do you guys feel about this? I know it's been talked about in the community like before, but like, how do you guys feel right off the cuff?
I don't know about this. I kind of think of harvesting as something that I like to do that's a little more mindless. So I don't know if I want to combat harvest nodes. I think I'd rather save that for combat. Like if I'm willing to like gear up for and push buttons and stuff, I might as well just find a group and go grind something.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. It's tempting. It's tempting to want something like this, and it's tempting to go a little deeper with it. But again, I have to ask myself, would I commit myself? Like, how much would I invest in this? And I don't know how much I would. But that's just me. Maybe some people want this kind of mechanic as part of their makeup. I don't know. What about you? I'm interested in what you think.
Well, so even though I say most of the stuff in early Vanguard beta actually was, in a sense, better than what was released, this, I actually totally understand they're reverting this system to a simple, you just click on it, your guy harvests. Right. I think harvesting, like Drax said, with no negative connotations, but like, I prefer to be a little mindless. It's something you just kind of zone out. Like the focus is more on like the exploration, right? You're navigating and like trying to find stuff. I feel like the only way that they would make an ability system for harvesting work is if it was so complex that a lot of people wouldn't do it. And so why even do that? Like, let's just do the wonderful, like, clicky thing, let groups participate and have fun with that. So that's kind of my take. Because I've actually played a system with abilities, and I gotta say, I think I just prefer the clicking.
Right. Good. Yeah. Good insight.
And Nefel just kind of teases, he says, this is something we'll talk about, when the time's right. So again, it sounds like lastly, before we kind of move on, it sounds like, as Nefel's talked about crafting, there's a lot of teasing and a lot of like deferral of information. And it really seems like, I feel like there's going to be a time, maybe, I don't know, next year or something, like we're going to have like a month or two of like the crafting and harvesting reveals where it's just like all eyes on Nefel and like everything's coming online for Pantheon and the crafting and harvesting. I'm actually looking forward to that day so much. And I think he's withholding for that a little bit,
Yeah, I think you're probably right. That day will come.
All right. So that's it for that thread. I would say definitely jump in. Maybe throw some ideas in there, some questions. You never know. Nefel might happen to respond. And I mean, he's always good with giving us some teases, but this actually had some great information, I think. So definitely jump into that. Or, I mean, you could start your own thread and maybe it'll get featured on our community discussion here. I love kind of searching for them,
Yeah. You might even start your own thread on the Pantheon Plus stuff.
Yes, there's the plug. There's got to be that like open space for the plug. So good job jumping on that.
That's the big brain wizard coming in right there.
This is why you bring me on.
I definitely wasn't like setting that up, but yeah. Before we move on, we've got a bunch of stuff I'm just going to try to blow through really quick, but is just as important. So we've got several new people introducing themselves on the official Pantheon forums, including last week because we did skip a week. So we've got Ralkyn, Lerou, and SinisterSaint, who obviously is participating in the forums quite a bit. So it's awesome. Mm-hmm. They're posting great little like intros. So definitely go say hi. Welcome to the community. You know the gist. The more we can shower them with hey, welcome. Oh, I love that story. Oh, I had the same experience. It's just so welcoming, honestly.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I've always said the same thing. That's always been my take on it too. It's really important to get that first impression, that first contact out there. So yeah, welcome to those folks.
Yeah, and also I was supposed to kind of keep a lookout for a follow-up story or like a next part in a series by Byproducts called Tyrion Grove Finder. There's going to be chapter 3, Talent and Choices. So I actually don't know if it's up now or if it's just soon to be up, but definitely take a look out for that. If we have it on Sunday, I'll link it in the chat or something.
Nice.
Actually, before we move on to the lore section, I thought this would be entirely appropriate to shout out Chris Kane.
Yeah, he's back.
He's here. He's doing Pantheon stuff. And so he put together this amazing video narrating The Bard at the Bridge, Part 2, Volume 2, which is a story written by community member Booch. This was started a long time ago, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, Booch has done very, J.S. Bucheri is the name, his author name, but we know him as Booch as well. Anyway, he's written several fan fiction pieces and collaborated with Chris Kane to do these voiceovers with them. And they're very enthralling. I enjoy listening to them quite a bit.
This one in particular is just so rad. It's so much action and it's so intense in some spots and I love that it includes all these community members characters. It's it's so good, and it's not cheesy either. It's so good, guys. Totally worth your time. Yeah.
Certain Ranger cameo. Just saying.
You'll have to listen and see who that might be, because
you never know.
But anyway,
I would listen to Chris Kane read the newspaper.
100%.
It doesn't even matter.
100%. I was just ecstatic to see new Pantheon content. Theric, you did such a good job with the first bait, and I hope he does one too. I'm gonna love them both. I promise.
Hey, he should totally do one. I mean, I enjoy doing it, but I'm no Chris Kane, so it was great to see that he's still active and doing stuff. And yeah, I'd love it if he read some more lore. So yeah.
But hey, that's gonna be it for this community discussions. So we can segue into our next segment.
Sit back and relax. It's time for the lore you know. Okay, so yeah, the lore you know this week is we are starting the new chapter. We just got the bait part 2 in the newsletter, so very exciting. It's very long, so we're going to be here for a few weeks because I'm going to do pieces of it again. But like I said, when we came to the conclusion of our last episode, we finished part 1, and the lore tale so far has told us about Dothane's quest to find the Dawn, Arakamel, the Ogre Dire Lord. So now we begin the journey into a very dangerous land of magma and stone. So follow along as I read the words of JN Gerhart, Pantheon's lead writer, as we start the bait, part 2. Bel Iris stood motionless amidst the gray stone trees of Kakalar. The sky was arrayed in fits of red and orange glow, the echoes of light from falls of lava that churned in the distance. Layers of smoke flowed like rivers through the air and on the ground. White, black, and gray, each the smoldering residue of centuries of war between the ancient trees and the older yet fresher lava flow. But even this level of desolation broke against the silhouette of the Mother Mage, or so I presumed, for she had ordered me to hide. Arakamel, forsaker of the Black Moon clan of Broken Maw. I imagined that as Bel Iris spoke, the waves of her twin voices parted the rivers of smoke like two hands clearing away sand. The tone of her twin voice carried a call to battle, and yet an invitation to surrender. It was unlike any bellow of war I had heard before. My confidence was high as I waited for his reply, knowing if one should come, it would not take the form of words. Arakamel has not spoken since the Dire awakened within him, Bel Iris prepared me in the days after we left Kadasa. Though my words will be chosen to provoke him, he will not speak to me. It is said he wears a plate over his mouth to make his dedication to silence clear. From my hidden perch amid several fallen trees, I nodded in the present as if agreeing with her, though I certainly did not understand why anyone would seek out the Dawn, let alone provoke him. But I did not contest her methods. I only obeyed. Such was my charge from Kazas himself. I should say that I obeyed in part. The mass of fallen trees blocked my view. Thus, I attempted to find a gap or crack in their immeasurable corpses that would grant a clear view of the Archive Wizard. The stone trees no longer had any bark, and in truth, they had ceased to be trees at all. Yet, in the cracks of their bodies, I glimpsed a mosaic of brilliant color, the likes of which no master craftsman of Kadasa could endeavor to reproduce. While turning from fibrous flesh to dead stone, the layers of petrified rings became chaotic and yet glorious. I had not considered that such beauty could be hidden amidst this wasteland of ash, heat, and time. I brushed my hand along the fissures of one such tree, whispering a song of the dwarven queen Ryfel, humbled as if I were touching her very own crown. I traced the radiant crack in the tree up and over its body, hoping to find a loose splinter I could take with me. I was greedy, yes, but for a good thing. As I reached the top of the fallen tree, my eyes fell upon a Ralkyn, holding Belle Iris by the throat, her booted feet pointed toward the charred earth. Like the great stone trees, she was regal but motionless. The pressure of the Dawn's fingers began to crack the outer husk of her lifeless body. Even from a distance, I could hear the strain of her skin giving away, gripping my heart as forcefully as he was clutching her throat. Ralkyn's skin was white as ash and covered with blood-red runes, his musculature wider and thicker than any ogre I had ever seen before. His dead black eyes stared directly into the lavender crystal counterparts of the Mother Mage, yet I saw not even a glint of fear within her, or within him. I could suffer no more hiding from the beast of Kakalar. I withdrew Hammer from my back, descending the body of the fallen tree as fast as my legs could carry. I did not know where to strike such a creature, only that I would have one opportunity. I whispered a cadence of surety, imbuing all that I had learned from my father and the mystic adepts into the force and precision of my swing. Eteam, Galdru Rain. Eteam, Faldru Thane. As I spoke, the weapon of my ancestor Thanes gained weight in my hands, and the twin heads of Hammer became malleable and chose a new form. The mystery of these words I dare not write down, nor the source of their power. Indeed, I have not written them as they were truly spoken, nor do I record the new form Hammer took in my hands. It was as if they were each mighty arms that had suddenly come alive with the flow of blood. I would bring their power to rest on the nape of the pale ogre's neck. As I sped towards him, it was as if nothing else existed in all of Terminus but that precise spot. I held Hammer low and gained speed, leaning into the air in front of me. I was too fast for Ralkyn. His massive shoulders did not turn at my approach. His black eyes did not even glint with my reflection. Though the starkness of his skin gave the Dawn the appearance of an apparition, it seemed that I was the ghost of our encounter. It was then I became convinced beyond any shadow of a doubt that this moment was the reason my king chose me for the task. And not for me, but for my weapon, for Hammer. Belle Iris lifted her right hand and sent a blast of air against my throat, just as the force of my arms brought the new head of Hammer up toward the naked nape of Ralkyn's neck. My strike missed him by a hair, catching only the smoke behind him, leaving trails of gray curling against his skin. Though the violent force of that gust alone would have knocked over any of my brethren, the ogre did not move even a muscle. I tumbled to the ground, rolling in a cloud of ash and calamity. I did not stop until my head struck the base of a petrified stump, cracking my helm and blocking my vision. In a moment, I was aware, turning quickly to see Ralkyn set Belle Iris down on her feet. She bowed her hooded head to him slightly, and I thought I sensed a tremor in her movement. Ralkyn turned and strode away, pulling the black-bladed weapon known as Moonfell from the stump above my head in one splendid motion. The ogre I had heard the legend of, but his weapon I had not. In his hand it moved as majestically as a dancer's staff, humming a pitch that seemed utterly unlike the screams of death it no doubt brought to his victims. All right.
Bum, 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 bum.
Dude.
Nice. Oh,
I'm like actually like grinning
that.
ear to ear. Like the bait has like been my favorite thing. Like this story is so enthralling to me.
Well, when it came out, the newsletter, so I read the newsletter the day it came out, but I didn't read the lore part because I'm like, nope, this is going to wait until I get home. I've, sat down, I've had my dinner, and I'm relaxing on the couch with a nice, some lighting, the proper lighting with a drink in my hand. And it did not disappoint. Like I read the whole thing, obviously, and it did not disappoint. It is just a great story. Although a little side note here about this, because I was being all clever at the time, and I tweeted something that JN had given us a little foreshadowing about some pronunciation. And while I was correcting that, Desert, I have to give you a little. I have to give you a tip of the cap
Thank
here.
you.
And I want you to share your win with our listeners, if you know what I'm talking about.
Guys, JN confirmed that you can properly pronounce it Bell Iris. It is not, I repeat, it is not officially Bell Iris anymore. So I'm elated. It's Bell Iris. It's Bell Iris.
I've made the proper adjustments, as you just heard in that section of reading. So she will now be Bell Iris, because I was certainly corrected, and Des, you did a great job of sleuthing that out. So kudos to you, my friend. So anyway, that brings us to the end of episode 72. I hope everybody's enjoyed it. Drac, thank you for stopping by, man. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Yeah, man.
No problem. Thanks for having me anytime.
Yeah, next time we expect cookies or baking, or we expect you to bring, at least beer or something like that. I don't know, man.
Well, I can't do any baking. My wife bakes, so maybe I can have her bake something. But
yes,
yeah, I don't bake.
That's the expectation, just so you know.
Perfect.
Okay, good. Anyway, yeah, so I want to thank everybody for hanging out with us today. As always, if you'd be so kind, please, leave a like on the YouTube, subscribe, ring the bell, and get notified when we do new videos, when we put a video up, because we're going to be putting lots of stuff up, like we talked about in the beginning with the new calendar, the content calendar for Pantheon Plus. So there should be lots of reasons to get notified when content is posted. And it helps people discover the show and discover Pantheon, because that's what this is all about. Building Pantheon's community, and the fun that we have every week only happens because everybody here listens and you support the show, and we just love having a good time. So have a great week, everyone, and we will see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Later.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Pantheon Plus Rewind. Pantheon Plus is not affiliated with Visionary Realms. Be sure to check out our Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube channels under the name Pantheon Plus. You can follow Theric at Pantheon Theric on Twitter, and Desrin at Desrin Does also on Twitter. And you can stay up to date with all things Pantheon at www.pantheon.plus. Until next time, cheers, and thanks for listening.